Recap the domains through an executive lens. Domain 1, Governance, Risk, and Compliance, anchors policies, frameworks, and regulatory duties. It tests your ability to set direction and assign accountability. Domain 2, Controls and Audit, assesses control design, operation, monitoring, and assurance evidence. Domain 3, Program Management and Operations, checks leadership of SOX, incident handling, continuity, and resource allocation. Domain 4, Core Technical Competencies, validates executive fluency in access, endpoints, networks, cloud, data, and encryption without diving into admin-level commands. Domain 5, Strategy, Finance, and Vendor Management, evaluates alignment, budgeting, contracts, and oversight. Your review should connect artifacts, policies, SLAs, risk registers, metrics to decisions, prioritization, acceptance, funding, escalation. That traceability is the thread exam writers pull.
Understand the exam's cognitive range. Expect recall of terminology, e.g. GDPR roles, ISO clauses, NIST families, comprehension of how frameworks fit together, application of methods in risk-based scenarios, and analysis that weighs business impact, compliance pressure, and stakeholder optics. A typical escalation item tests whether you escalate to the board or to a steering committee. A governance item probes whether you choose a policy change, a compensating control, or risk acceptance with conditions. The scanner looks for executive maturity, clarity of roles, evidentiary thinking, and defensible prioritization. Calibrate your answer patterns to executive verbs, approve, mandate, delegate, monitor, rather than operational verbs like configure or patch. Align choices to accountability, not keystrokes. Anticipate weaknesses that commonly drain points. Candidates misread risk math, mixing SLE with ALE, or applying ARO incorrectly. Blur business continuity, BCP, with disaster recovery, DR, and confuse the scope and purpose of ISO 27001, NIST RMF, and COBIT. Others answer as technologists instead of executives, overlooking governance artifacts, charters, RACIs, committee minutes, and audit trails. Create one-page fixes. 1. A risk math crib sheet with SLE, ARO, ALE, ROI formulas and sample numbers. 2. A BCP versus DR comparison table with RTO, RPO examples. 3. A framework map showing drivers, artifacts, and scope. Rehearse these quickly before the exam so you recognize pattern words that point to the intended concept. Time management is an executive control, not an afterthought. Set a pacing guardrail of roughly 1 minute per question. First pass, answer clean recalls and straightforward governance items immediately. Second pass, work scenario questions that need brief analysis. Final pass, return to flagged items only if time remains. Use the mark and move rule when you spend more than 90 seconds without progress. Bank the rest of the exam before returning. Avoid perfectionism on any single item. 150 questions reward breadth of steady decisions over brilliance on a few. Remember, a confident, timely, very good answer beats a perfect answer you never submit. For scenario-based questions, locate your role first. Are you the CISO recommending to the board, chairing a steering committee, or approving a risk exception? Next, anchor to GRC context. What policy, control objective, metric, or risk register entry is implicated? Eliminate options that bypass governance, e.g., jump straight to tooling without policy/process, ignore legal exposure, or undercut segregation of duties. Prefer choices that are business-aligned, evidence-backed, and auditable. Define/approve policy, assign accountable owner, set metric and review cadence, document decision, and communicate to stakeholders. Technical plausibility matters, but executive defensibility wins.
Acronyms and terminology are low friction points. Bank them. Build a compact glossary covering regulatory and framework shorthand. ISO, NIST, PCI DSS, HIPAA, SOX, GDPR, identity terms, IAM, PAM, ABAC/RBAC, risk and finance, ALE, SLE, ARO, ROI, NPV, IRR, continuity, BCP, DR, RTO, RPO, and governance artifacts, RACI, SLA, DPA, AOC. Practice quick recognition plus when it applies. e.g., ABAC for fine-grained policy at scale, PAM for privileged risk, DPA when processing personal data, SOC 2 Type 2 for operating effectiveness evidence. Flashcards or a 2-page terms plus trigger sheet solidify recall under time pressure.
Refresh quantitative and qualitative risk decisioning. Work several fast problems. Given asset value 2M and exposure factor 25%, SLE equals 500K. If ARO equals 0.2, ALE equals 100K. If a control costs $60,000 annually and reduces ARO to 0.05, residual ALE equals 25K. Annual benefit approximately 75K. Simple ROI approximately 75 minus 60 divided by 60 equals 25%. Practice payback, initial/annual net benefit, NPV, discounted flows minus cost, and IRR, rate at NPV equals 0. In qualitative cases, be explicit. Likelihood times impact, control strength, detect/response capability, and regulatory heat. The exam rewards structured thinking more than exact decimals.
Convert pitfalls into checklists you can apply in 20 seconds. For governance items, policy, owner, metric, cadence, evidence. For vendor items, contract clause, SLA, audit right, remediation timeline. For finance, benefit/cost window, ROI/TCO, risk linkage. For operations, prepare, detect, contain, recover, lessons learned. For DR, RTO/RPO set, runbook, test evidence, communications. Use these micro-frameworks to triage choices and avoid distractors. If two options look similar, pick the one with clearer accountability and evidence trails. Use elimination aggressively. Remove answers that A. violate law or policy, B. skip risk analysis, C. weaken segregation of duties, or D. solve a local symptom while increasing systemic risk. Prefer answers that start with governance, define, approve, then operationalize, implement, monitor, then verify, audit, metric. When two answers are both plausible, ask, which creates board-level defensibility next quarter when auditors ask, show me? The more auditable path is usually the intended executive choice. Stabilize your mindset. Pre-commit to not chasing sunk time. If you reach 90 seconds, flag and move. Default to your prepared frameworks. Do not improvise entirely new logic at minute 95. If you feel stuck, answer with the option that most preserves governance integrity and reduces legal exposure. Those priorities are rarely wrong. Remind yourself the scoring curve rewards consistent competence, not perfection. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other prepcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Center your governance answers on life cycle and accountability. Policies are drafted with stakeholder input, approved by the appropriate authority, communicated, enforced through controls and procedures, reviewed on cadence, and retired or revised with evidence. Use RAC or role matrices to show who is responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. Governance committees, risk councils, and the board set risk appetite, approve exceptions, and demand metrics. When a question asks, what should the CISO do next, choose the step that aligns policy, risk appetite, and oversight, not a purely technical change detached from governance. Audit and compliance questions test your ability to connect evidence to obligations. Distinguish internal audits, assurance for management, external audits, independent attestation, and regulatory exams, legal compliance. Know the value of right to audit clauses, evidence packs, policies, logs, tickets, SOAR runbooks, SOC reports, and remediation tracking. Tie outcomes to governance. Findings move to the risk register. Owners and due dates set. Board informed via dashboards, and closure evidenced. Recall major drivers, HIPAA, SOX, GDPR, PCI DSS, and how each shapes control depth and reporting cadence. Operational readiness spans SOC structure, incident lifecycle, and continuity. Expect items on Tier 1 through 3 responsibilities, SIEM correlation value, and playbook orchestration. Rehearse the incident steps, preparation, detection/analysis, containment, eradication, recovery, lessons learned, and the artifacts each step should produce.
DR/BCP questions hinge on RTO/RPO trade-offs, test evidence, alternate sites, and communications. Vendor oversight rolls in via contracts, SLAs, risk scoring, and audit rights. Answer like an operator with an executive's pen. Ensure procedures exist, are tested, and produce metrics reviewed at governance forums. Arrive exam-ready in logistics and mindset. Verify testing rules, ID, and check-in timing. Sleep, hydrate, and eat in a way that sustains focus across 2.5 hours. Commit to your pacing plan and flag discipline. If you meet an unfamiliar acronym, translate the scenario into first principles. What is the asset? What is the risk? What is the role? Which control is most defensible? Tactical resets. Closing eyes for 2 breaths, rereading the stem aloud in your head, preserve clarity when the clock is loudest. Know the immediate post-exam flow. Many candidates see preliminary results at the test center. If unsuccessful, study the domain breakdown to plan a targeted retake. Rebuild with spaced repetition on weak areas and fresh scenario practice that forces executive trade-offs. If successful, pivot to certification maintenance. Diarize renewal windows, track ECE credits, and note annual fees. Capture what worked in your prep so you can mentor peers and reinforce your own learning. Continuing education is part of the CCISO promise. Maintain a rolling plan for ECEs, conferences, publishing, teaching, standardization work, or contributing to exam development. Rotate topics to cover emerging domains: AI governance, software supply chain, post-quantum crypto, privacy engineering, so your leadership stays relevant. Maintain documentation, agendas, slide decks, certificates, because audits require evidence, not memory. Treat your ECE plan as a personal roadmap tied to business priorities and your organization's strategy. Ethics is not a chapter. It is the context of every decision. EC Council's code requires legality, honesty, professionalism, and confidentiality. On the exam, favor options that preserve integrity, even if another choice seems faster operationally. Avoid any answer that compromises privacy without due process, obscures evidence, or tolerates conflicts of interest. In practice, ethical leadership earns stakeholder trust, protects your license to operate, and sustains the credibility your role demands. Deploy practical study tactics until test day. Use the CCISO body of knowledge as the spine, then overlay case studies that require a board memo or exception justification. Take timed mini-blocks of 25-30 questions to reinforce pacing. For every miss, write the corrected reasoning in one sentence and tag it to a domain. Rotate between quantitative drills, risk and finance, and qualitative scenarios, governance, vendor, audit, to keep both systems, calculation and judgment, fresh. Build and use a final checklist. Confirm glossary mastery. Run 5 quick risk math items. Review policy lifecycle and RACI patterns. Skim audit evidence lists, and restate RTO/RPO definitions with one example. Rehearse 2 vendor scenarios, 1 contract clause question, and 1 oversight escalation. Verify exam day logistics, route, ID, confirmation email. Close the binder and do something calming. Your brain consolidates when you step back. During the exam, narrate your executive reasoning silently. My role is CISO. Policy exists/doesn't. Risk appetite requires X. Evidence Y will be asked later. Therefore, select option Z. This internal script keeps you in governance mode and away from technician reflexes. If stuck between 2 decent answers, choose the one that documents accountability, sets a review cadence, and produces auditable evidence with the least legal exposure. Then move on. Your final reassurance. You are not being tested on trick minutia, but on repeatable, defensible leadership. The CCISO exam measures executive judgment across governance, controls and audit, operations, core competencies, and strategy, finance, vendor management. Success depends on disciplined time management, scenario-based reasoning, and mastery of risk and financial decisions. Prepare with ethics at the center, frameworks at your fingertips, and a pacing plan you trust. Walk in as the leader you already are, calm, structured, and accountable, and let a season of deliberate practice carry you to the finish.